Welcome to the Jewish Education Experience podcast with your hosts, Yasmina and Ari, who will be uncovering gems of wisdom with Jewish educators from around the world.
To our audience, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support, and we appreciate you sharing our podcast with others also. Please consider supporting our podcast financially by contributing via Zelle, jewisheducationpodcast@gmail.com, or by joining our Patreon community, www.patreon.com/Jewish Education Experience Podcast. And to all of you Jewish educators and students of Jewish education around the world, Chizchu ve'imtzu. May you be strengthened and encouraged in your holy endeavors. Hello, our guest today is Lillian Rappaport. Lillian is a longtime educator born and raised in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. She taught French and Spanish at the Yeshiva of Flatbush in Brooklyn, New York. After she and her family returned to Harrisburg, she began to teach at Ohev Shalom and Chisuk Emuna, both two congregations in the area. And then she went on to become the religious school director of Ohev Shalom, and she was the director there for over 20 years. And she just recently retired. Lillian is also extremely passionate about Holocaust education. As a child of survivors, she organizes the reading of the names every year around the anniversary of the Holocaust.
You know, while I was the educational director at Ohev Shalom, I was also the Jewish education director at the Federation all those years as well.
Okay.
And I directed the Hebrew High and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was going to say now we get to give you a chance to just blow this away and give us the full story.
So we'll dive into the first question. And first off, hello, Lillian. Welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
It's my pleasure.
Can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself and just how you began your journey in education?
Well, you know, I am a product of the educational system in our Jewish community. As a child, I grew up at the Jewish Community Center, Kesher, Israel. I spent the first 9 years of my schooling at the Yeshiva Academy, which really, really provided me the most incredible foundation to pursue any aspect of Judaism that I chose. I think I came to Jewish education sort of in a roundabout way. I was always trying to do other things. I have a master's degree in French. I was going to be a foreign language teacher, which I did do for a while, but I always found myself coming back to Jewish education. I remember I was teaching in a high school in Long Island, and I was teaching French and Hebrew, and I was the advisor to the Hebrew club. And then just slowly, everything that I was doing really started to revolve around the Jewish community and Jewish education. So I was involved in Jewish education, probably, a solid 40 years, maybe even a little bit more.
Wow, I like that. Even though you've taught Spanish and Hebrew and French, and this has really been your passion about educating other children, and I know you've taught also older students about their Jewish identity and Jewish values, and so it's cool that you've kind of come full circle with that. Are there any educators in particular that you admire?
You know, this is going to sound a little bit different, but I admire educators who fill a void, who try to make a difference in a community, in a certain population. So the educator that I have always revered is Rabbi David Silver. He was the rabbi of the synagogue where my family affiliated when I was growing up. But he also, in the mid 1940s, Harrisburg is a small community. It's not a large community that has a lot of Jewish resources. And he saw a void here he really felt that this community should have a Jewish day school to educate Jewish children, and not only in top of the line secular studies, but in Jewish studies. So he saw the void. He partnered with the Federation, with community leaders, and he created this school that has produced um, Jewish community leaders for 75 years.
Right.
I find that extraordinary. Um, as a student, I remember he nurtured that school with such love and attention. As a child, for 9 years, actually, when I was at the yeshiva, which is now called the Silver Academy in his honor, as it should be, he came into every single classroom every single day. He knew everything about every child in that school.
Wow.
When I think about the way that I was raised, of course, by my wonderful mother and father, but I was also raised by Rabbi Silver. And if you speak to other people, other who are products of his school, his influence is alive till this day. Again, I found him extraordinary, and certainly now as a Jewish educator, I find him all the more extraordinary. Talk about making a difference in a community.
Was it his personality, Lillian, or what was it?
I think it was his drive. I think it was his vision. You know, he had a vision of the school, the yeshiva, the Silver Academy was almost like a prep school. We had top of the line secular studies. When we left the yeshiva, wherever we went, if we went to public school, if we went to yeshiva high school in Baltimore or New York, we were the top students. I mean, we were so well prepared in our secular studies, and we were also well prepared in our Jewish studies, even though the school obviously had an Orthodox slant. Many of the students in the school came from conservative backgrounds as well. There were a lot of children in the school from not just from Kesher Israel, but from Bethel and Chisuk Emuna. And so we really got a rounded Jewish education, so that any way that I would want to practice my Judaism, I had the tools to do it.
I was just going to ask, why do you think he was so successful in really building this community and building the school and having that ability to produce these Jews that would go on to other places and be leaders wherever they ended up?
I think there was an extraordinary amount of respect for Rabbi Silver. I think you don't see that level of deference and respect nowadays for our Jewish community leaders, for rabbis, which is a shame.
Right.
But Rabbi Silver, we used to joke around, not we, but when I was a child, adults, that he was the best fundraiser in the city.
Wow.
Because nobody could say no to Rabbi Silver. Obviously his what he was fundraising for was such a noble cause, Jewish education. But again, everybody just had extraordinary amount of respect for Rabbi Silver.
Right.
I think, listen, I was a child. I think it probably was difficult for people to be friends with Rabbi Silver because, you looked up to him so much. But again, when I think about somebody who has made a difference in our Jewish community, the yeshiva and Kesher Israel and the mikvah and Holy Spirit Hospital and the Jewish home, it was all Rabbi Silver. Who can say that today?
Right. I'm just curious. Do you know if it was he like heavily focused on the Jewish education portion of it, and there was someone else who was pushing for the top notch secular education, or was he involved in both of those?
I'm sure he was involved with both of them, but the school always had a Jewish studies principal and a general studies principal. Rabbi Silver was the headmaster. He was the one who sort of just oversaw everything. but we had, still to this day, there are wonderful teachers. That school is um, a nurturing place for children. Every child is special. Every child is loved and cherished, and the best is pulled out of the children. And it's Rabbi Silver's legacy.
Wow.
Definitely. It really is. It's amazing. Hopefully, we can inspire more educators to try and, not that they have to be like him, but to be at that level where they can inspire the students and really help young people become passionate about, being Jewish and being out in the world and being a leader.
And we just want to say that you, of course, Lillian, you have some of that too. So, we know you from here and miss you.
Thank you.
Sure. So how would you define education? Because typically we think of the Hebrew word chinuch and, teaching the child according to their way. So how would you define that?
So I sort of come from a different part of Jewish education, in that for so many years I directed supplementary programs. So when you direct a supplementary program like a religious school or a Hebrew high school, as opposed to a day school, one of the things you really have to do is you have to pick and choose. You don't have the time. You probably have about 4 hours a week, as opposed to 4 hours a day for Jewish studies in a day school. So working in a religious school, Hebrew high setting, you really have to pick and choose those aspects of Judaism that you feel are the most important. So the connection to Klal Yisrael, to the Jewish people, feeling a part of that, a love and a pride for the Jewish state, for Israel, understanding, basically our holidays, knowing that, knowing the difference between Pesach and Sukkot, and when the holidays fall and what we do during the holidays, having Hebrew literacy.
Right.
So understanding our history. For me, I think understanding the lessons of the Holocaust are really important. I think understanding what happened in the Holocaust, of course, is important, but translating what happened in 1940 to 2020, and how those lessons, which are universal lessons, taking a stand, and when you see something wrong, say something, and helping your neighbor and not be a bystander. So all of those, and again, everything is done in an age appropriate way. The way I've taught my second graders is not the way I've taught my 12th graders at Hebrew High.
Right.
So, but the challenge of running supplementary programs is trying to pick and choose. I call it filling a Jewish toolbox. So I try to put into that toolbox the things that they will need to move on and live meaningful, productive, connected Jewish lives. But it's a real challenge. I think people educators who are involved in day schools, you have the luxury of time there. You don't have to pick and choose, and you can fill that toolbox much more, because you have so much more time than in the supplemental programs.
That is true. And I guess now you're retired, so you haven't been really the educational director right during COVID. So just balancing that. But I'm wondering,
that has to be such a challenge.
Right.
Religious school is enough of a challenge. I always prided myself in that the hardest part of the religious school that I ran was just getting the kids there. Once they were there, they were pretty happy, because my teachers were very They were creative. They were loving. They were really wonderful, wonderful. I had a wonderful staff. Um, but you know, there are just a lot of challenges in religious school to try to um, again, you want the children to connect to being Jewish, and you want them to feel positive being in their synagogue, that their synagogue is their place, and that this is a place that is always a safe place for them, where they were always wanted and cherished. um, so but it can get complicated.
Do you think you can do that successfully, like on Zoom and other platforms, or do you really need to have
I
like
think
the
I think I think it's such a challenge.
right.
I have such respect for people who try to teach on Zoom. I think there are so many outside influences. I think this is a year we just have to get through. And then, you know, there's something to be said about being in a school or being in a synagogue and having your peers there, and going to services and davening with your classmates, with your schoolmates, and seeing your teachers, and just having that, and connecting with your rabbi and the religious school director, or the head of the school. You know, you miss all that. I think everybody is doing the best they can, but it's obviously it's not the real thing.
So what's the biggest challenge you faced as an educator in your career?
You know, the biggest challenge I faced, I felt, was I was terrified of turning a child off to being Jewish.
Mm,
You know,
Ah,
with religious school, and the children are giving up something. Okay, they're giving up soccer or basketball, or cheerleading practice or whatever, so that they can come to Hebrew school on Sunday morning and Wednesday afternoon. And again, for the most part, I think I ran a very good program, in that it was interesting to the kids, and they knew that they were loved. Um, but every once in a while, I would speak to a parent, and they would say, I had to bring my child kicking and screaming to religious school. And
right.
that shattered me. And what I told the parent was, then don't bring them.
mm,
Okay, it was too much of a burden on me to consider that I could possibly turn a child off to being Jewish. That's the antithesis of how of what my hard work was for.
right.
So I wanted the children to feel good about being Jewish, to feel connected, to just to involve themselves in the arts and the crafts and the music and the dancing and all the wonderful cultural things that are Jewish, in addition to the academics. You know, I wanted them to understand the spectrum of being Jewish. That Judaism isn't just a religion; it's a way of life. It's a way of seeing the world. And if I if I couldn't make that happen in a positive way for a child, it was very, very upsetting too. It didn't
Well, that
happen that
makes
often, thankfully.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense because you don't want to we don't want to turn them off, and it doesn't take much, right? It can just one thing, unfortunately, can do that. One bad experience can turn a child off, and then you just never know. You hope one day that they'll be inspired and they'll recognize that Judaism inside of them. So it's true, as educators, we have to be so careful. Um,
You know, I think the big challenge to Jewish education, that the formal Jewish educational institutions be half as good as the informal Jewish educational experiences. Jewish camping, that's the best. You know, you have the Camp Ramaz and the Camp Harlems, and and all the other Jewish camping, and they have it right. They take Judaism and they incorporate it into every single aspect of the day. And
right.
I have yet to find a child who has gone to a Jewish camp who has not loved it, who has not felt wonderful about being Jewish. So the challenge of the formal Jewish educational settings, the schools, the Hebrew schools, is to be like the informal Jewish educational settings. That would be absolutely wonderful.
Wow, that's such an interesting idea.
If kids coming out of a day school and Hebrew school felt as positive and as connected to their Judaism as kids coming out of the Jewish camping experience.
Do you know if Rabbi Silver was involved in any of the camp stuff?
Not that I'm aware of, Ari, but he was involved with so much, but for some reason I think probably not.
Okay.
I think he had his hands full with everything else that he was doing.
It's true. He was pretty busy.
Yeah.
How do you stay motivated, and what things have you used in the past as an educational director to kind of stay motivated to keep at it?
Yasmina, that is such an easy question. The kids, the kids give you strength. The kids give you energy. When all the years that I was working, I had a candy dish in my office, and the kids would just come in. They would come in, and they knew if they came in, they could get some candy. But some kids didn't even take candy. They just came in and they sat down and they talked to me and they asked me, how I was, or they asked me questions about my family. And the kids just give you so much strength. I mean, I adore kids. I was lucky that, the kids gave me strength, and I was so lucky. My faculty was just wonderful. We really were like a family, and I was always so grateful to them, and I really, I thank them a great deal. A school is only as good as your frontline people. If you have good teachers who love teaching and who care about children and who know their subject matter and who go with the flow and let things roll off their backs, if you have good frontline people, you have a good school. An educational director or principal obviously is important. They have a vision and they create the curriculum and they make sure that everything is in place. But it's your frontline people who really, 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 make or break a school.
Yeah, Lillian, I was just listening to another podcast with Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah.
And he was saying, being a stand-up comedian, it's such a great profession because it's like you get instant feedback and like there's nothing better, right. So is that the same with teachers? I mean, they're up there longer than stand-up comedians and they're getting feedback right away too.
I think so. And I think that, again, if you are a teacher who likes kids, the kids like you back 10 times. And it's just, I know that when you're not allowed to do it now, but when I was a teacher, I would put my arm around the kids or, give them a hug, and I'm sorry that you can't do that anymore.
Right.
Because that's part of it too. It's the love and the affection and the concern and the nurturing. That's all part of it too.
That's so true. And you don't get that when you're virtual and
that's true. Yeah.
Well, even without the virtual, they're kind of moving away from that, aren't they?
Right. No, you can't, you can't. I mean, it's right. Sometimes things happen for good reasons and sometimes things happen and you sort of have to ask yourself, it wasn't so bad the way it was before, when teachers could hug children.
Right.
So what advice would you give to new educators who are just beginning their journey?
I would say surround yourself by the best people. Find teachers who, a lot of, I'm just going to digress a little bit. A lot of times when you teach Hebrew school, it's hard to find somebody who has the Jewish background, who has the pedagogy, and who has that personality that likes kids. So a lot of it you can provide for the teachers, but that personality that really enjoys kids, that likes kids. So I would think that, if I were an educator starting out, or if I was talking to an educator, I would say find teachers who really, really like kids. Find teachers that kids can relate to, that kids won't be afraid of. Um, Teachers who are patient, who are loving. Um, I would also tell um, the educator to be good to your teachers.
For
Um,
sure.
I think that if you show teachers kindness and consideration and respect and gratitude, it creates a family-like environment where the teachers know that you have their back, but you also know that if you need something from the teachers, if you need them to double up or to do an extra project, that they will do it for you because they care for you and they know that you care for them.
It's true. And yeah, it's important for them to have that and
If you have happy teachers, you have a happy school.
yeah,
Huh.
definitely. How did you I guess try to promote that when you were the educational director?
It's actually, when I first started there, I started at Ohev Shalom in 1994. And I didn't know the faculty or most of them, but you create relationships. I remember when I first started, I met with each of them personally because I wanted to know who was going to be teaching in the school. And then over the years, you develop a friendship. I mean, I think every one of the teachers at OF Shalom, we became really good friends, and we became really devoted to each other and concerned about not just what was going on in the classroom, but concerned about families and sicknesses and things that happen in life. We invited each other to weddings and bar mitzvahs and funerals. I think you just instill this sense of caring and warmth and understanding and consideration. If my teachers needed to take time off, absolutely. I mean, I never said boo. And I made other arrangements. I mean, I think if people understand that they're valued and appreciated, it's just a two-way street, and it just works out so well. Or that was my experience.
Yeah, I'm sure you miss it though a little bit being
I
retired,
miss it
right?
I miss it terribly. I miss it terribly. I really do. It was such a part of my life for so long. So I still have
Mm.
things to do. I still want to travel. I still want to do things. Of course, I'm not traveling anywhere now, but I
After
just felt that,
coronavirus, right?
right, yeah, I just felt that it was the right time to retire.
Sure.
And I would have had a terrible time with the Zoom. I'm so grateful that Jason is doing that and I don't have to do it.
Yeah, you got out just in time.
It was like I must have done something good in my life. God was watching over me.
Now, that being said, how do you think, with all these challenges that we have as educators, and especially if you're teaching in a religious school setting or Hebrew school, or how do you think we can help our children or our students build a proper Torah foundation?
Oh God, Yasmina, that's really hard. That's really hard. Um, I think a real solid Torah foundation um, requires time. Um, I I think religious schools do the best they can.
Right.
Um, but again, if you have 4 hours a week, it's not, and you have so many other things to teach. Um, I really think a solid Torah foundation. I think it's the day schools. I think they can do it best because they have the time. I think the supplementary programs do the best they can,
Right.
but it's limited. It's limited again in 4 hours a week when you have to teach them how to read Hebrew, and you have to give them a sense of everything else that is involved with being Jewish. It's you just can't do it all.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm a product of the Hebrew school, religious school system. So sometimes, even though there is that limited time, sometimes those students maybe do more studying as they grow, as they get older. They get influenced in maybe college. They do Hillel, or they do
Right.
these other
They
programs.
have gap. There are year-long gap courses that you
Exactly.
can take. Study in Israel. I mean, so there are opportunities, but I think it has to be I think the child, again, unless you're in a day school environment. Beyond that, I think it has to be sought out. It's interesting because I'm a product of a day school. I spent 9 years at the yeshiva in Harrisburg. My husband is a product of Hebrew school,
Mm-hmm.
and you could see the difference. And he went to a conservative Hebrew school. I think maybe it was even 4 days a week. It was significant, the amount of time that he spent at Hebrew school. But there's a difference. There's a difference in the Hebrew literacy. There's a difference in the understanding of Torah, of the laws, of kashrut, of everything.
Right.
But again, we all do the best we can. I think that one of the bigger challenges is that young people today, it used to be that you sent your child either to a day school or a Hebrew school, okay, to give your child a Jewish education. But a Jewish education was a priority. Now it's not. So young people like your age, maybe a little bit older, a lot of them don't see a Jewish education as a priority, joining a synagogue as a priority. So I think Judaism has a lot of soul searching to do. Is how do we keep these young people connected? How
Right.
do you get them to understand that a Jewish education, even a Hebrew school education, is important?
Right.
Right.
But I'm wondering, like, how much of that do you think is also just the family, like the upbringing? I mean, you mentioned you and your husband, but did you also have different, I guess, family dynamics growing up?
I mean, he's one of three children. I'm one of three children. He was raised in a synagogue very similar to Chisuk Emuna, conservadox. I was raised at Kesher Israel, Orthodox, but my parents were not Orthodox. They were just very traditional.
Okay.
Um, but again, it's understanding the value of a Jewish education.
Right.
And young families nowadays, um, I'm generalizing. Some young families nowadays don't see it as any kind of a priority. It's just not important, which is why the religious schools. I mean, I'm for sure we have many hundreds of Jewish children in this community between the ages of 5 and 18. And if you count the children in the religious schools and at the Silver Academy, it maybe it might add up to 200. It might. So where are all the other children?
Mm-hmm.
And why aren't they getting a Jewish education?
Right. Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, like, because you've probably seen. I mean, I know you've seen so many different families and students, but if you had a family who wasn't observant at all, but it was important for them to give their child a Jewish education, is that going to be a problem for the student because there's one way at school, there's one way at home, or can that be
I think
very
I think
successful?
it I think kids figure that out really fast. I think kids understand that, this is how we do it at home. And this is how, Orthodox Judaism or conservative Judaism or Reform Judaism does it. I don't think kids are confused. I know with me, again, my father worked on Shabbos. We drove on Shabbos. We were not Shomrei Shabbat, although I was in shul every Shabbos, and, so what I learned in the yeshiva was different. I mean, we kept a kosher home. But it was different than how we observed at home. I watched television on Shabbos. I went to the movies on Shabbos, but I knew we weren't supposed to. So but I wasn't confused about it at all. I don't think kids are confused.
Mm.
And also, a family that is completely non-observant would most likely send their child to a religious school that is more liberal, as opposed to one that is more traditional.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Huh. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, because the next question here is what does successful Jewish education in the future look like to you? So I guess I'm wondering, based on what you said, if you think that would be different. Is that going to change, or is some stuff just going to stay the same in that way?
I think Jewish educators should take a long, hard look at Jewish camping and see what they're doing. I'm very serious. And
Yeah.
see what they're doing right, because these kids come out of it feeling so positive about being Jewish and so connected to Israel. Some of them, like at Camp Ramah, they come out learning how to daven and learning how to speak Hebrew. I think looking at the certainly for Hebrew schools, maybe not for day schools, but certainly for Hebrew schools, to take a long, hard look. I've seen, I've spoken to people who they've changed the whole religious school model. That over the winter break and over the spring break or whatever, they have sort of like in-house programming for a solid week or 2 weeks, where the kids are there from 9 to 5, and they try to recreate what camping does. I think Jewish education should be joyful. I think Jewish education should be meaningful and relevant. I think it should be geared to the population. Like I know that at Ohev Shalom, we taught kashrut, not because I felt that many of the families would adhere to the kashrut regulations, but I never wanted the kids to be exposed to anything Jewish and not know what it was.
Right.
I always felt that they could say, I'm not interested in pursuing this, but I know what it is. That if I wanted to, it's sort of like, I sort of see Jewish education as like reading a menu. You want to expose the children to as many things as possible that is on that menu, so they can read that menu in an educated way. And then they pick and choose those aspects from the menu that are meaningful to them and will help them live a rich, fulfilling Jewish life. Now, that's actually a very, very liberal philosophy. More traditional Judaism would not adhere to that. But I really felt, in working at being a conservative Jew working in a reform setting, I just wanted to expose the children to as many things as possible, to fill in kashrut and Jewish death rituals and tahara and shiva, and a lot of things that Reform Jews may not practice, but I wanted the kids to know about. So that
Actually, and it's interesting you mentioned that, because we were talking with one of your former colleagues that you worked with, and they mentioned that in the program there at Ohev Shalom, you talk about the Chevra Kadisha, what happens when someone dies and you take care of the body and everything. And I also
we take them to Hetrick. We take them to the mikvah.
Right. So we learned that also, that you take the kids to the mikveh. And I know growing up for me and in a conservative Hebrew school, I never learned about the mikveh. I mean, yeah, I learned about it as it is involved with the, conversion, but nothing to do with the,
Taharat mishpach.
exactly, Taharat Mishpacha, or even, how you tovel dishes and when you have to kosher them and that sort of thing. So it's so interesting that you guys include
Well,
those
again,
principles.
I never wanted, I never want any of the kids to come across something that is Jewish
Makes
and not
sense.
what it is, and not have been exposed to it. We go to an Orthodox service every year, because I mean that's really different for the kids because the whole service is in English. I mean, it's in Hebrew. The whole Torah portion is read.
Right.
It's a different sensibility, but I want them. This is I think with Jewish education, there are a lot of different ways to be Jewish, and they're all right. There isn't one better way or one worse way to be Jewish. And I think that's very important. Anyway, we try our hardest to create a program that is meaningful and challenging and interesting and relevant, and to make Judaism something that is really popular. I still do all the Holocaust programming in the community. Even though I've retired, I'm still doing all the Holocaust programming. And a lot of times I'll get phone calls from schools and civic organizations that they're having a multicultural day, and they want somebody from the Jewish community to talk about the Holocaust. And I said, no. I said, the Holocaust is not Judaism. The Holocaust was a very, very awful, sad, terrible chapter in Judaism. But I said, Judaism has beautiful cultures and traditions and rituals and holidays. I said, we can send somebody to talk about what Judaism is, but not what the Holocaust was.
Well, Lillian, you've inspired me. I'm thinking of doing like a flip model where we take the students over the summer and study really hard, and then we just go to camp for the rest of the year.
Bravo, bravo. You will be giving Judaism a shot in the arm, Jewish education a shot in the arm.
I know we might have to try and recruit you out of retirement. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, listen, right now I'm not going anywhere, so I'm all yours.
Well, Lillian, it was such a pleasure to speak with you and get some gems from you and learn from you. And we really appreciate you taking the time to join us on the podcast today.
Well, Yasmin, I think you walk on water. I think you are so wonderful. So it's my pleasure. You can ask me anything.
Aww,
You too, Ari.
We appreciate it, and we can't wait till this is over and we can see you and give you a hug again.
Amen.
When this is all over, we're definitely going to have to catch up about all this and more.
Okay, my pleasure.
Definitely. All right. Well, we wish you all the best, Lillian.
You too. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.